right, welcome everybody to the fourth episode of the Near Mint Hockey Card Podcast. I can't believe we're already four. I feel like we just started. I'm Elan Dubrofsky. Joining me, as always, Ryan Krieg, and we've got a huge show today. Ryan, a lot has happened in the past week.
Yeah, hey Elon, hey everyone. I was putting together notes for this show and writing down players, and so much has happened. Free agency, the draft, the playoffs ended what seems like forever ago, but how long ago was that?
I feel like, yeah, a week and a half ago. Congrats to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I know, Ryan, that you, and this is going to tie into the theme for the show, you went in and just bought a Braden Point Young Guns graded card. So kind of, I feel like a little bit the opposite of the advice we were giving, just in terms of like we were saying, maybe don't buy when the person's value is at its highest. And like Braden Point is coming off this amazing playoffs. Is the idea that it's gone down a bit since like the peak, and you just felt now is a good time to get in before it's going to jump up again when the next season starts?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I actually got one earlier in the playoffs, like before the Lightning were really crushing. And this one, actually, I got for a bit cheaper. And it kind of ties back to our last episode. We were talking about sniping, so bidding at the very last second. And I just saw this one at a good price, and I just put a bid in at the end. And I didn't really expect it to get it that cheap. Actually, the guy messaged me when he was shipping it and was like, "Wow, you got a really good deal on this." I was like, okay.
Well, can you share? I want to know now what you spent,
Um,
or you just not remember off the top of your head.
with shipping, I feel like it was about 115
Okay, yeah, and that must have been
Canadian.
going. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I always wonder what it's like for the Americans when they're browsing, because I'm browsing eBay, and then every once in a while I see a card in American dollars, and it's like looks so cheap if you're an American, but then once you do the conversion, it's like the $65 card is actually $100. But the other way, it must be really fun to see these like 99 cent Canadian and be like, this is like a quarter. This is nothing.
Basically free, right?
But yeah, what was Point peaking at like right as the Lightning were in the finals and he was getting those multi-point games?
So I looked at his cards and they fluctuated quite a bit, but I saw some for as high as 190, 200 when
Yeah.
like they were right at the end of it and he was potentially going to win the MVP of the playoffs. And I mean, he was insane. A lot of people are arguing he should have won it. So,
Oh, you mean the
um,
Conn Smythe?
yeah. And I think $100 for a Braden Point, and this was a BGS 9.5, by the way. Um, like he's only going up from here. He's 24 years old.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, I'm definitely like I'm just jealous, no, but it's one of those things where like not everyone could go up from here, right? Like you could say like Nick Suzuki's selling for $60.
Right.
Maybe you could say, oh, he's only going up from here. But also, we are seeing that it's like the new players seem to always be starting super high, but then players like we're new to this hobby, but I'm looking at some really great players like a Sebastian Aho, who is probably something Nick Suzuki could aspire to be, and like nothing against Nick Suzuki, but I think that would be a really great high point for him if he could get to what Sebastian Aho's already been doing, and Aho is already cheaper. So you got to wonder with some of these players, but Braden Point's already been around for a couple of years. Anyways, the point of all this conversation is to say that the idea for today's show is we're going to just be talking about how these events are affecting the prices and values of cards, because a lot has gone on over the last couple of weeks. And Ryan, I know you've been making a lot of bets like that Braden Point purchase. Just try to jump in on something before you think it's going to go up, or trying to get in on the ground floor of a player that's going to go up. And then probably on the flip side, there's probably some players that after all this free agency and trades and stuff, like their values go down. Like I could think of examples of each, and I'm thinking for this episode we can just talk through some of these players that we think like that we're watching to see what's going to happen to their cards. And we've already seen obviously some big jumps. Maybe we can just get started. Like one guy that I feel like you mentioned right away that you were excited about and you bought a bunch of cards for is Tyson Barrie over on Edmonton. So they signed him as a free agent. And this coincides with Oscar Klefbom being announced to be injured for a little while. So it's like all that top power play spot with McDavid and Draisaitl is like his for the taking, and he's known to be a big power play guy. So there's no reason why you shouldn't expect him to come in next season and start racking up the points on a team that's popular, the Edmonton Oilers. How can that not be good for his card value?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember that hockey card value is very tied to the amount of hype a player is going to have. And that's why we talk about things like free agency, we talk about trades, we talk about the draft, guys winning in the playoffs. And so I think the Tyson Barrie hype train is about to start rolling really fast because, in Toronto, he didn't really get the playing time on that top power play. He didn't really ever take off there. And Toronto's a big market, but he just never clicked there. And I feel like the fans never clicked with him either. Um, I think like this isn't the least risky guy ever. That could happen again in Edmonton. But I think he gets on power play one, plays with McDavid and Draisaitl, and you're talking about Tyson Barrie all year long again.
Yeah, exactly. And while he's making headlines, that would be a reason why people would be wanting to get his card. And
Yeah.
then I wonder, like on the flip side, like when I think I'm like a fantasy hockey guy, right? Like I'm doing this like Keeping Carlson Fantasy Hockey podcast. I'm always thinking about every time there's a signing, I'm trying to think of who benefits and who's hurt. And when we heard the news a few weeks ago that Oscar Klefbom was going to be injured, I was thinking, wow, like Evan Bouchard, what a great opportunity for him. It's going to be his rookie year probably next season. And now there's a wide open spot on the top power play. Now Barrie comes in, and so Bouchard, I guess we're gonna have to wait. Plus, there's always that risk that like, what if Barrie does click, and then all of a sudden, the Oilers extend him for a few years, give him a nice long contract, and now Bouchard is locked away from that top power play, for the first 5 or so years of his career. I'm not saying that I necessarily think this is going to happen, but it's a possibility. So, have you noticed, or like, do you have any concerns about Evan Bouchard's card value? Like, obviously, we wouldn't have expected him anyways to be a huge star right away. But does something like Barrie coming in affect Bouchard, or is that more of like a fantasy way of thinking? It doesn't really affect the way people buy and sell their hockey cards.
I have a couple interesting thoughts on Bouchard. The first one is that his cards are actually more valuable than Tyson Barrie's right now. And I think that bodes well for Barrie's value going to Edmonton. Um, but I think Bouchard is the kind of guy that, he might not be a this year project, but I could see him coming in and being the Heiskanen to Klingberg kind of comparison with him and Barrie. And, Heiskanen's the guy that everyone talks about and also the guy with the higher card value, even though, Klingberg could be considered the number one guy.
Right. Yeah. I guess in the playoffs, Heiskanen had that huge run at the start and his card value spiked. He's another one, by the way, who it's interesting now because his value has gone down since the peaks of the playoffs. But I don't necessarily think, like, I don't begrudge someone for not having sold if they had him when they had the chance, just because the high might come again. But yeah, just such a great example of how, these values are fluctuating. And yeah, back to Bouchard and Tyson Barrie, I guess that's another thing where we'll kind of have to wait and see how the season starts and how things are going. Are you planning on, like, you bought these Tyson Barrie cards? Is your idea to, as soon as the season starts, if he has a hot start, you're going to try to sell it right away? Or is this like a long-term wait and see if he signs a long-term contract extension?
Yeah, so I actually first quickly want to talk about the actual process of getting these because
Oh, yeah, good
it,
point.
it really like as soon as he signed, and maybe a hot tip here is to make sure you have a way of getting the news really quickly when you're a hockey card investor or buyer because it popped up on my app Left Wing Lock and I immediately went to eBay and bought a couple up. And as I was clicking into Young Guns for Tyson Barrie, ones that were listed were already sold. So it was a matter of a minute or two, and they were starting to go fast. So I kind of nabbed a couple up. Um, but now it's hard to find Tyson Barrie cards on eBay. They really aren't there. You the young guns are going for way more than they were before because the lower price ones are bought up, and the Future Watch autos are not even there anymore. So there's kind of a demand issue, which is typically how things will go up in price, right? Because it's harder to get them.
Yeah, I guess what you have to do, yeah, like you're saying, is jump in quickly, or maybe it's a bit too late. Like at this point, you have to decide then if it's worth paying the higher price
Right.
just because you want to get in now, which is not the best deal, but still you think something better than what it'll be later on. I actually, when Tyler Toffoli signed with the Habs, I was out and I didn't get a chance to like look into it until maybe a half an hour later. I saw the notification on my phone like as I was grocery shopping, and then I got home and just like you're saying on eBay, all the Toffoli, like I was looking for Toffoli PSA 10 Young Guns, and they were like basically all gone or like super already highly inflated. Like buy it now, it's for like 130, 140 when they were like 50, $60 before. So that was it for eBay. But then I looked on comc.com, and I actually found like three Tyler Toffoli, 3 or 4 Tyler Toffoli PSA 10 Young Guns selling for like still $45 American. Whoever was running these stores, I guess, forgot to update it or didn't realize. I bought one right away. Then I posted in the hockey card channel of our Discord, the Keep 'em Carlson Discord, saying like, "Hey, you guys, you should buy one of these. Like, this looks like a really good price." And then, whatever, we chatted. I logged off. I came on later. I clicked that same link that I shared, and like all those cards were gone too. So I hope one of the people in that Discord did go and buy that card, because I feel like, just like Barrie going to Edmonton, like Montreal's obviously a place where the players seem to have inflated value just because there's so many Habs fans out there. I feel like like half of the cards that I buy are coming out of Quebec whenever
Okay.
they're getting shipped to me on eBay. So obviously there's a lot of Habs fans out there, and Tyler Toffoli is going to probably be if he could be even close to what he was doing on Vancouver, get on a good line and be producing at like a 60 plus point pace. Got to imagine people are going to be really excited about him, especially if the Habs actually go far. It seems like they're building a team that could do something now. They've got Toffoli, they've got Josh Anderson, they've got Jake Allen, so they have a decent backup hopefully, so Carey Price doesn't get worn out. To me, it all comes together, at least for next year, a team that should be able to compete, get back into the playoffs. And then I guess you never know.
Yeah, so I guess before I ask you what your plan is with Tyler Toffoli, for me, Tyson Barrie, I'm probably waiting till at least 3/4 of the way through the season when he's crushed, but I'm probably waiting till playoffs. That's when
Mm.
things really go crazy. And I think the Oilers missing the playoffs would be a travesty with that lineup right now. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
what are
if the
you thinking
Oilers,
for
yeah.
Toffoli? Because he's a bit older. He's got, is it a 1 year contract or is it longer?
No, 4 years, I
4.
believe. Yeah, he's locked in. He's only like 27, 28. I guess I should have had that information available. I'll check right now. Cap friendly to Foley. This is great podcasting. But like, I don't, that's a good point, because we did do an episode. We were like, come up with a plan. My plan is definitely to sell. Like, I'm not thinking
Yeah.
that Tyler Toffoli is going to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame and have a huge like resale value in like 10 years. Yeah, it's 4 years, 4.25 million per year is his contract. And he is currently 28 years old. So
Okay.
yeah, I feel like makes sense what you said about Barry. Same about Toffoli. I'm thinking playoffs. Like, I hope the Habs will make the playoffs. And yeah, I feel like that would be a good time. While, especially if they could win a round like they did this past time versus Pittsburgh. If they could do that again, that would be huge. I feel like also like my cost was so low. It was like 45 American plus maybe $10 shipping. So maybe I spent like 60, $65 Canadian. So I feel like I should be able to sell a PSA 10 card anyways for that much, just because those are
Yeah.
hard to get. But at the same time, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have been able to sell it if he was still on LA like a couple years ago. But he's on the Habs for the next 4 years, so I don't think I'm in a huge rush. But I would say maybe it's the kind of thing where we just pick a price. Like, maybe if it
Yeah.
gets to like double, like if it gets like $100 plus, maybe that's when I start to list it. Because I don't know, there's probably also a ceiling. Like, he's not going to be like a McDavid and just like explode and be going for like $1,000+ So I feel like if I could get $100 something I spent $60 on, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's a smart strategy with Toffoli. You're not going to get 100 points out of a guy playing on Montreal, in my opinion. So the sky is not the limit, but
Yeah.
I think definitely a sound investment.
Yeah, and I guess since we're on the Habs, like, let's talk about another player that goes in the other direction, right? So Josh Anderson and Max Domi swaps. They
Yep.
send Domi to Columbus, and I feel like that again, like, just because Montreal is such a popular place for hockey cards, I feel like now Max Domi's value, which was probably already pretty low since he had such a bad year last year, especially at the end, I feel like he was already dipping, and now it's like I don't see any reason why you buy it. I guess the only reason to buy a Max Domi card is if you really love what Columbus is doing and you think they're going to be going, to the cup finals, and, it'll be kind of like, Jamie Benn, like someone who just like no one was really thinking about. Then all of a sudden he was like doing really well. And then obviously then he went up. So I guess if you love Columbus, then maybe you buy in on Domi. But at this point, I wonder if his card's still a little bit inflated just because he still was on Montreal for a while. Maybe you wait a little bit until the start of the year. But then, and I feel like Josh Anderson is kind of like another Toffoli. Like, I feel like if someone just does pretty well on Montreal, their card is gonna have value. So you just
Yeah.
need to, get it and then sell at the right time. I actually did a similar thing with Anderson. I actually was on the ball, and I found someone selling a lot of 4 Josh Anderson Young Guns for like $8. Like I
Yeah.
spent like a couple bucks each on the card. So I just like got that lot. I'm sure the person who sold it was very annoyed because he probably could have sold that same lot for like $20 if he would have just waited. But
Yeah, at
that's a
two
shame.
dollars a pop, you can't really go wrong with the guy that's going to play on the Canadians. The one thing I wonder, and I'm going to watch it closely because I do have a Domi card, is he was kind of having a tough time in Montreal, and obviously the team there didn't think he had a future there. The fans weren't super into him, and so maybe his career turns around, and that could help.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
but
I guess depends how much it costs for you to buy in at this point.
yeah, actually, you can see Domi behind me in my photos. um,
So do you remember by any chance how much you spent on that Domi back in the day?
yeah, so the Young Guns PSA 10 behind me, I think, was 45.
PSA 10. Okay, I'm seeing October 5th on eBay. PSA 10 Young Guns. Here we go. Apples to apples, 36.24 plus $5 shipping. So
Yeah, so
not
about
too
the
far
same.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it hasn't dipped like crazy. So you made a hopefully a good purchase, and we'll see if it goes up. I guess like hopefully the people who are listening now, you'll stick with us. We're gonna like it'll be really interesting. Like I feel like we say this every episode, but like once the season actually starts, there'll be like really big fluctuations. Here we're seeing minor ones, but they're like sort of the obvious things. We just jumped in on like a Leafs player or a Habs or Oilers. Like what other Canadian teams? I guess like big one is Vancouver, who, everyone went nuts about Thatcher Demko when he had those 3 great games in the playoffs. I remember you were telling me before I even got into hockey cards, like right at the start, you were like saying Demko was at like $10. Then he had those couple good games. And all of a sudden his cards were selling for 50. I think that's what actually got me like, that's what clicked in my brain where I was like, oh my God, this is fantasy. This will
Yeah.
be so much fun. Because like if you would have predicted that Demko was going to break out, obviously it's hard to predict a Markstrom injury, but if you would have known that Demko was going to break out, then you could have really cashed in. Now the Demko Young Guns. Let me bring that up quickly. I think I've seen it still going pretty high, not at the $50 level, but like a raw one for like around $30, 25, 30, maybe even 35 on eBay. Then I would imagine a PSA 10, we're talking like around 100. Now Vancouver brings in Braden Holtby, which is like whatever. Like Holtby's struggled lately, so that's a whole other question of whether that was a smart move for them or not. But do you think this helps or hurts the short term like value of Thatcher Demko cards? And Holtby cards actually.
So I think it's a really interesting situation. Demko. So one thing I want to do on a future episode is pick like 5 guys and find a way to go way back in their career and track their values, because Thatcher Demko was the guy that the Canucks and their fans and everyone was raving about. Like this is the guy of the future. So I would imagine that his cards actually kind of spiked when he was a rookie, or when his Young Guns card originally came out, and then kind of faded away as he didn't do like amazing things, and Markstrom became their number one. And then, as you said, spiked in the playoffs, and now it's down a bit with Holtby there. I think Holtby can't really go too far up anymore. He's won his cup. I guess he's in Vancouver now, but I don't see that being a crazy card from an investment
Hmm.
perspective.
I just feel like since
Demko,
Vancouver is such a popular team, I just wonder if like let's say they win a couple playoff rounds and Holtby is their
yeah.
starter, that could be big. Of course, I don't really think that's going to happen. Like I just because I don't have that much confidence in Holtby. Do you want to try to take a guess? I'm looking now at a couple Holtby Young Guns. So raw,
Ooh,
but they look like
that's gonna be tough.
as good condition as possible. A couple, so one sold on October 4th. Oh, you know what? I'm not seeing any Holtby Young Guns that have sold on eBay since the deadline. I'm looking at October 4th and October 3rd. So that's interesting. I'm gonna have to dig deeper. But do you want to try to guess what they sold for on those days? It's both around the same price.
Yeah, so it's really interesting with some of the older players where they just aren't being sold at the same volume as these younger guys. Now, maybe that's because there's less flying around.
Yeah.
Guys have them tucked away in their collections, and they're like, "I'm keeping that." Um, but I don't know. Holtby, and you said just raw?
Yeah, just a raw Young Guns. I'll give you some more information. The one on October 4th, 24 bids, and it was $4 shipping. And the one on the 3rd was 20 bids and a $4 shipping also.
Hmm.
Both like
I
very nice pictures that the seller
yeah,
posted.
I would guess maybe 55?
Oh, lower. No, no,
Lower?
33 and 36.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it's
maybe it would be 55 now that he's on the Canucks.
maybe, but he hasn't done anything there yet. And I
Well,
don't
yeah.
know whether just getting traded to a Canadian team really spikes guys. I
Well,
think
Tyson
Holtby's
Barrie.
situation, yeah, I mean, Tyson Barrie, but we don't know that it's really spiked yet. It's only been a couple days.
Mhm.
Um, and we know that Tyson Barrie is at least going to get a shot at power play one. I I think that's an obvious place for him to land, at least to get a shot. Whereas Holtby, is he the number one? Are they splitting? Is he the number two? We don't really know, and I think we won't know for a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess obviously we don't have the answer here. Like we can't predict. I would probably not be buying the Holtby cards just because if if I could find like I just feel like it's not going to be the kind of thing where like it's probably inflated now as much as it would be just because people are excited about him. And then actually I'm not finding any Holtby Young Guns. I got to tell you, like of like unsold. I'm searching on eBay Holtby Young Guns. It's like zero results. So I don't even know
Ha.
how you'll get it. So I guess we can't. It doesn't even matter if I have advice for you or not on this. But I
Well,
wouldn't buy just because I don't expect him to do that well.
none available, but you found some sold, right?
Yeah, I found some
Yeah,
sold,
okay. Because
but not recently.
something interesting that I was looking at is Mike Hoffman, who, unless something happened, is still a free agent, right?
Yeah, as of
Yeah.
now, as
Okay.
of 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday night or
Yeah.
Tuesday night.
So Mike Hoffman's still a free agent, and I was kind of looking at him as potentially an interesting card to buy because if he lands on the right team, he's a pure goal scorer, and that could be like dynamite. He could blow up, but he's a guy that does not have a Young Guns card, or I can not find it on the internet. But I'm pretty sure he doesn't have one because of his weird path into the NHL. And I found the same thing for Anders Lee when I was looking at, the captain of the Islanders who would have raised the cup if they won kind of thing. And he didn't have a Young Guns card either. So there's a couple guys in the league that, because they kind of get in a weird way, they just don't get one.
You'd think eventually just I guess so then they just had a card the next year, but it didn't say Young Guns on it. It was just like a base card. I feel like in the olden days, we hockey card collectors, when I was a kid, we would have called just his first year that he has a base card, that would be called his rookie card. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter how Upper Deck labels it. But now I guess you're saying that if it doesn't say the word Young Guns, then no one
Well,
considers it as such.
he still has other rookie cards by Upper Deck in other series.
Mm.
And he's got like other limited cards, and yeah, there are quote unquote rookie cards for Mike Hoffman, but if you want the Young Guns, it's not there. So it was kind of an interesting perspective from, if you're going to invest in Hoffman, you kind of have to take a different route. But there's also this idea of like population. So potentially Hoffman's an interesting one because there's not that many cards out there that you can get of Mike Hoffman.
Yeah, well, now I'm also finding it's the same thing about Braden Holtby. I just looked on comp
Right.
also. His Young Guns isn't available there either. So maybe now I do want a Holtby Young Guns now that I'm realizing I can't get one. But the other big signing that I wanted to run by you for sure is Taylor Hall goes to
Yeah.
Buffalo for this 1 year deal. And in interviews, he's been saying he'd be even potentially happy to stay in Buffalo and sign a longer term contract. So like obviously this affects Hall's value. And I feel like also someone like Erasmus Dahlin, who's a
Mm,
super hot young rookie that, his cards have been selling actually not as high as I would have expected for, like Makar and Hughes are way above Dahlin.
yeah.
And like Dahlin was drafted first overall, but obviously Makar and Hughes both had those amazing rookie seasons and, they went far into the playoffs while Buffalo's terrible and probably no one's interested in Dahlin. So I
Yeah.
just feel like the thing is with Buffalo, you like I've had many times where I thought like maybe Buffalo will be good this year, and then it never comes to fruition. But I'm
No.
thinking it again now. I have to tell you, like they got Eric Stahl, they got Taylor Hall, they've got Dahlin, who's hopefully just getting better. They've got I don't know Montour and Ristolainen. They've got like decent enough defensemen. They got Linus Allmark, who I feel like was really good at the end of last year and I think could be ready to take a prominent role. I don't think they're going to waste time starting Carter Hutton a lot like they did last year. So I
No.
mean, to me, I don't know. I see you like kind of rolling your eyes, and I don't blame you. But like I there's many reasons to be skeptical, but at the same time, like imagine if out of nowhere Buffalo is decent, makes the playoffs. Like Taylor Hall helps. I don't. His card's already selling for a lot. I feel like I don't think it would be that like much of a smart investment to buy his card. I could see it going up by a little, but like someone like a Darlene who you could get right now raw for like $30-$40. I look at Makar and Hughes and think I wonder if there's a similar upside for Darlene.
Yeah, so I mean, like out of the gates, I'm not a Buffalo believer, but I don't. That's not stopping me from looking at players on their team. I'm big on Darlene. I have a few of his cards. I think this is the guy where he really could skyrocket. He's that talented. All it's going to take is, either individual success or Buffalo success. I think the interesting thing with Hall and what you said earlier about him staying there scares me a bit But because he took a 1 year contract, he's ripe to either leave at the deadline to whatever team he chooses to play for, basically, because he's not got a no move clause, or leave in the summer. So maybe this like Buffalo signing drops his card value and you can kind of reinvest in Taylor Hall as he dips. I think, and I've said this before, I think him being in an Oilers jersey on his Young Guns card has value, even though he's playing on Buffalo.
I see. Yeah. So he'll always have some raw value, even if he's not playing well, just because he has the Oilers jersey.
Yeah,
That's interesting. By the way, I misspoke about Darlene. He's selling for cheaper than I even said. I'm seeing
it's a
a couple
great
days
deal.
ago a lot of two Young Guns of his, $52. We're talking like 25 each. I see another one went for 1702. It's like, okay, I'm gonna actually have to pause the show right now and start bidding on some Darlene cards. I already have a couple and I want more. I'm also seeing a PSA 10 sold. What's the day? October yesterday. $85 for a PSA. I spent more on a Shabbat. I didn't
Yeah.
even know I could have gotten a Darlene. I guess like
Yes,
Shabbat's on the Sens and Ottawa has more fans than Buffalo probably.
I
But yeah, I don't know. I think add Darlene to my list of like buy now before the season starts because I don't know. I think he was already destined to be better than last year just because what
I
is he now
agree.
like only 21. Now all of a sudden you've got just Taylor Hall there. I feel like that's just so huge.
Yeah, I would definitely say go get him. If you want to just do that, I'll talk for a minute. But
Okay, I'm on it.
yeah, so I'm definitely huge on Darlene from a hockey card perspective. I think I got a BGS 9.5. I think it might have been 60 or 70. And most guys you can't get under $100 for a mint graded card. And yeah, I see a huge future for him. Um, who else do we need to talk about free
Well,
agency wise?
there is actually someone that I wanted to bring up. You've interrupted my search, by the way, but I guess
I'm
it's okay
sorry.
since we are recording a podcast. There is another guy in Buffalo who I feel like might go the other direction potentially. You've got like Victor Olofsson, who had his
Mm,
good rookie year last year, and his Young Guns cards have been selling for I don't know, like a lot. Like it costs more to get a Olofsson than a Fiala, and I've been like big on trying to get Fialas lately because we talked about on a previous episode, so I think he's going to go up. Or like a Nikolai Ehlers also is cheaper currently than Olofsson. So obviously Olofsson's getting that like young player bump that people are just
yep.
wondering like, oh wow, the sky's the limit. But I almost feel like the sky might just be what he did last season.
Yeah.
Like he had a really good season. He was the trigger man on the power play and crushed it. I think as the season wore on, his numbers went down a bit. I think part of it was other teams learned how to sort of contain him or figured out like sort of what his move was. He played on the half wall and they would like,
Right.
so whatever, they learned how to defend against the Buffalo power play. So all that already, I was a little bit concerned about Olofsson. Then now you have Taylor Hall, another left wing who could bump him from the Eichel line, could potentially either bump him from the power play completely, or at the very least bump him from that like spot. Maybe he becomes a net front guy, or like maybe they put them somewhere else on the power play. But like, I just don't think that Olofsson has a great chance to repeat. I don't think he's going to be terrible, but I don't think he's necessarily going to repeat like what was he? He was on pace for like 30 plus goals. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's going to happen. And so I wouldn't be buying him right now. And if you
No.
have an Olofsson, I don't know. I think it might even be a time to sell. I guess you're not going to make too much money, but yeah, you could sell for probably like 10, $15 at right now. And I think that might be its peak.
Yeah, I'm not huge on him. I think, as you kind of alluded to, his points were coming on the power play and the power play only. And on a Buffalo team that now has a better power play with Stahl and Hall joining. So I wouldn't really get in on him. Um, if we go to kind of two defensemen that are sort of tied together in a way, in Pietrangelo and Krug, the two
Oh
big
yeah.
guys, I'm really curious to see what happens to their values. Pietrangelo in Vegas and Krug in St. Louis. St. Louis, right? I'm not
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
You got
Okay.
it
It sounds weird, man. Like he's been in
yeah.
Boston forever.
We'll have to get used to it. And then
Yeah.
maybe let's throw a third person in there just to make it interesting. What
Sure.
about Charlie McAvoy in Boston,
Ooh.
who now has his top power play spot opening up potentially with Krug out of the picture?
Man, Boston, I don't know what their plan was and if maybe they just kept missing out on free agents, but I think McAvoy is a rough choice for their number one power play.
It's just so hard to say, just because like Krug has been so successful, right? And it's
Yeah.
almost like, Barrie was so successful in Colorado, and it was so hard to parse out how much of it is just Barrie's amazing versus just how sweet of a spot is that. And as long as you're somewhat capable, you're going to be producing because you just like feed it to McKinnon or Ranson or something, and then something's going to happen. And so like with Krug, like obviously he's a good player. He takes a lot of shots, which I've always liked. Like in fantasy, he's always been great. But we're going to learn a lot now when he goes to St. Louis, who doesn't have as high power to power play as Boston does. And yeah, like maybe McAvoy, who I think is a better like all around player than Krug, in terms of he plays bigger minutes, but obviously that doesn't matter for hockey card value. What matters is probably mainly the points. And I don't know. I feel like it's a great spot to be in. I don't know if he could do as well as Krug did, but maybe it won't be too far off. Of course, McAvoy has a little bit of a risk because last year there were stretches when Krug would get injured and like Matt Grishlick would be taking top
Yep.
power play.
Yep.
But come on, like McAvoy is clearly now, if they're not bringing anyone in, like he's the future of the team. They got to at least give him a shot on that top power play and see how it goes. Matt Grishlick isn't even signed at the moment, so I don't know who else they could even put there.
Yeah, I think Boston is in a bit of a weird spot. As someone in the chat is pointing out, Marchand and Pasternak are injured right now, and who knows exactly when they're coming back. The
Well, who knows when
team,
the season's even
who
starting?
knows when the season's starting. I think from like a hockey card perspective, you might be able to get McAvoy and make a few bucks, but I would kind of not be going that direction myself. I think you could bet on even Krug or Pietrangelo and do better.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna look up McAvoy. Well, the thing is, Krug and Pietrangelo are already selling for a lot, so I guess that's what I was gonna look up. Krug, I guess, makes me. They both make me nervous, actually. Krug and Pietrangelo. I don't know if I would be buying either, to be honest, because right now, well, Krug actually just had one sell on October. Oh, this is again October 4th for like $10. That was before he went to St. Louis, and again, he
ten
he
dollars.
he seems like another person that perhaps it doesn't have a lot of cards available because it's an older card.
Yeah.
Maybe they all got snapped up, but.
But when you
Uh,
think $10 for Torey Krug, guy that's won the Stanley Cup how many times? Just
Yeah,
once or
no,
twice?
Boston hasn't won the cup in a while.
Maybe not since
Did he?
him. I'm sure he won. No, I don't know.
Okay, I'll look this up also now.
Here's where we stumble. It's not hockey card knowledge, right? I don't
He
know.
made it to the finals. I know that against St. Louis.
Right. Okay. So Petrangelo definitely has a cup, and $10. Like if you're choosing between Olafson or Krug, like come on.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I like Krug's situation just in terms of chance to get points better now on St. Louis, because I think he again it seems like it's all about the power play, especially for these defensemen. By the way, okay, I'm bringing this up now just to confirm here.
I thought he
Boston
had
last
one.
So Boston won a cup in 2011. I don't think Krug's a 10-year veteran in the league. So I don't think so.
That seems risky. Yeah. Um,
But yeah, Petrangelo is interesting because I think he's a really great all-around player, and he kind of I don't say lucked into, but like he sort of like fell into a good situation in St. Louis where Shattenkirk was the top power play defenseman for a while and was racking up the points. Then Shattenkirk left. A lot of people thought Parayko would maybe take that job, but it turned out Petrangelo got it, and like good for him, and he did well. He got a lot of power play points, a lot of points overall, was averaging around 50, 60 points for the last couple seasons. But they didn't have a huge competition for him. Like they brought in Justin Falk, who I was a little, I thought maybe because he had been the top power play guy in Carolina, which I think a lot of people think that was probably a dumb idea, especially because they had Dougie Hamilton for that last year. But now Pietrangelo has real competition because he goes to Vegas where there's Shea Theodore, who we've actually talked about on the show, who I've told you that I couldn't believe how cheap his cards were for
yeah.
an up and coming stud like him. And I think a lot of people are concerned about Theodore now in fantasy and I guess hockey cards
Yeah.
that now Petrangelo's there. He's going to take over all those points, but I just don't know if that's the case. I feel like Vegas didn't necessarily bring in Pietrangelo because they need more offense or they need like help on the power play. I think they just need one of these great leadership and like big minute stabilizing defensemen, but I don't see why they mess with the power play. Like, why not just leave Theodore on power play one, put Pietrangelo on the second unit, which gets actually a decent amount of time. So all that to say, I'm not too concerned right now about Theodore's value, even though you said that you thought it was like pretty capped and limited in the first place. And then as far as Pietrangelo goes, I'm not that excited about his value either. I think that he'll be like a valuable player on the team, but I don't know if he's going to rack in the points. And maybe you could tell me, is like a Vegas player versus a St. Louis player have some cachet?
Yeah, I think it's a bit tough to say. Like Vegas has a lot of hype around them, so I like that. But they also don't have a lot of like actual fans like baked in through like the years and years of history the same way that Boston does, for example. So I mean, I personally am probably not looking at Krug or Pietrangelo as investment opportunities, but it's pretty interesting to see where they go. And I wouldn't be like shocked if those values did take an uptick as they see success on those teams. St. Louis is obviously a hockey city, so I could see that kind of giving him a bit of a bump, but it's no more of a hockey city than Boston. And Krug's probably going to have the same success there as he did in Boston, so I don't really see a huge reason besides a change of scenery for that to change anything. Um,
Yeah, it's one of those things. Probably, I think these guys are probably like, obviously if they go on a deep playoff run, that obviously
yeah,
we've seen that this helps someone's value. But all right, so I'm seeing right now 9.5 BGS, Charlie McAvoy, Young Guns. And with the BGS, actually, you can help me understand this. We're going to do a future show about grading. We were actually going to do grading this week, but then all this news happened. We decided that we would push that off. But it's a 9.5, but it's got a 10 for centering and a 10 for surface,
mm-hmm.
and then 9.5 for corners and 9.5 for edges. Currently at $31. Still a couple days left, so it'll probably go for a lot more. But I'm gonna put in a bid right now. Like, this is more just
On
like
air
on it.
bidding.
It doesn't matter. And this goes against my advice last week of sniping. I'm putting in 32, which I know is gonna get beaten, and then I'll actually come up with my sniper. This is more just so I know eBay will like remind me that like, hey, you bid on this thing and it's about to run out. I'm the highest bidder though right now, so whoever put 31 didn't have something higher. So I don't know. I like McAvoy as a potential guy, and Boston has a lot of fans. Like outside of the Canadian teams, I feel like they might be one of the teams with a bigger fan base. Maybe who would you say is the biggest American team in terms of fan base? Is it Rangers or Boston or someone
It's
else?
it's got to be the Rangers. The Rangers are the guys that are always making the same or close to the same amount of money as Toronto.
Yeah.
Um, whether that's like the most dedicated fan base or the best fan base, quote unquote, is kind of irrelevant. It's when it comes to this, it's like the number of fans or number of collectors. Um,
I mean, I'm happy to hear that because I've invested in a couple of Panarins, which I'm
there you
excited
go.
for, and we're gonna send a couple of them to get graded, and I'm waiting to. I'm gonna get rich, but okay. I think
That actually
you meant.
might be a good segue into the draft with Lafreniere coming to New York and that team kind of like overnight turning into a different team. Um, and, you know, you can't get the young guns for the drafted players yet, but there was a lot of hype around the draft and they do have cards out. So I have a few CHL cards. So I listed a few Lafrenieres, some Byfields, and they're actually surprisingly valuable. A base, I sold a base Jamie Drysdale, star rookie. So it's just like the basic rookie card, kind of like the CHL's version of Young Guns,
Mhm.
for $5.
Okay,
Jamie Drysdale,
he's on the Red Wings, correct?
Anaheim, I want to say.
Who did the Red Wings get? Okay, well now I really sound dumb, but well, the draft just happened,
But
and
this
I'm
this
gonna.
just proves my point that like this card, and I think like these CHL cards from looking at kind of historically, they get really hot about now, right after the draft happens and as the draft happens. But then as soon as their next real cards come out from Upper Deck with like the Rangers jerseys or the Anaheim jerseys, those cards are going to kind of dip again. So it's really interesting to see how these events like the draft kind of cause all this hype around cards, and then it'll kind of wane after that.
Yeah, we talked about this before that maybe it's a good time to sell these CHL cards right now. By the way, I was thinking of Lucas Raymond. I don't know why Jamie
Uh,
Drysdale and Lucas Raymond. I don't know why I got them mixed up. One's a forward and one's a defenseman. So I apologize. We're going to be doing a draft recap podcast on Keeping Carlson soon. So then I'll have it like cemented in my head. Right now, it's still a little bit jumbly, I guess, aside from obviously the top few. And actually, the other guy in my mind, which has, I guess you can't buy a hockey card of him now, or maybe you can, but like Marco Rossi, I'm excited
yeah,
about because I feel like he's the guy who maybe lands in the most beneficial spot because we've been talking on that other podcast about how like Minnesota, who knows what their plan was for center because they traded away Eric Stahl, Mikko Koivu was leaving. Like they traded also Luke Kunin, who I think I was mentioning on this podcast, as
I
someone I was
know.
thinking of investing in because I thought maybe he could get a shot on the top line. He's gone too to Nashville. So now all of a sudden we've got Marco Rossi potentially next year. He could start his career playing with red hot Kevin Fiala, I guess show favorite Kevin Fiala at this point, and also Kirill Kaprizov, who people are really excited about. Whose young guns do you think is going to sell for more off the bat when they come out? Rossi or Kaprizov?
I think Marco Rossi will, and the reason I do is because he has character. So, there was photos of him with his legs that are just like tree stumps. Everyone's talking about his workout routine being ridiculous and his commitment to the game being crazy. Um, they're both on Minnesota, so like wash there. But I I think Rossi will have more hype, and maybe Kaprizov takes him over because Kaprizov's like more NHL ready, so his will probably go up in the near term more.
Mm-hmm.
But once Rossi gets into the league, it'll kind of be. I'd kind of say Rossi has a higher hockey card ceiling, if we want to call it that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. At least at the start, like when
Yeah,
the value first comes out, then like you say, the performance will affect it. Though it is interesting how it's not always the case where the performance really even matters, because Jack Hughes and Capo Caco are still sky high. Meanwhile, Nikita Gusev, who started slow but ended the season like a lot better than Jack Hughes on the same team, and Gusev's young guns that came out this exact same year, just last year, it's like $4 or $5. You can get a Gusev for nothing. And I bet you next year also Gusev is going to get more points. But obviously he's older, so people I guess are
yeah.
already assuming that his ceiling is, he's not going to be a star for as long as a Jack Hughes. But
I think
okay.
I think the hype around like a guy that gets drafted and then you talk about as like your prospect on those teams and like they graduate onto their NHL teams just happens to have like more media attention and more attention from fans than a guy that plays in the KHL, is amazing, gets signed, comes over, and then just kind of starts playing.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of just makes sense as a hockey fan, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we'll be watching for all of these cards. And yeah, there's so many we could talk about, but hopefully this was a fun chat for people to listen to about all the different card fluctuations. Maybe so we've got some fun still planned for the people hanging out with us live, because you've got a box of 2015-16 Upper Deck that you're going to be opening some packs from, that we got some of our listeners to buy in on, and there's a potential McDavid Young Guns that someone is going to be a proud owner of soon. And I have two of those packs myself, so I'm excited to see how that'll go. So before we get to that, do we have time? Can I tell one fun story about adventures of buying cards off of Kijiji?
I don't see why not.
Okay, so I actually got a couple quick ones. So first of all, a friend of ours who's right here in the chat room right now, Mathieu, he pointed out that he found a guy that was selling Pettersson Young Guns. It looked really good. But the guy's in Guelph, and he just wrote "oh no" in the chat. The guy was in Guelph and like not willing to ship, and Mathieu is like close to Ottawa, and I'm in Toronto, and so like I don't have a car, I didn't have a way to get to Guelph, so I wrote in my work Slack, is there anyone who lives in Guelph? And then my boss, actually the CTO of the company, was like, I'm actually going there this weekend. So I ended up having like so much, messaging the guy on Kijiji, like coordinating with my boss, like to arrange like the pickup time. And then like my boss told me that he ended up having to go like behind some dumpster or something. It was kind of a sketchy pickup, and he almost like backed out. But eventually at the end of the day, he got the card. Then I biked over to his house yesterday at night when he got home, and then he wanted to hang out for a little bit. So I had like chit chat, and anyways, but I got home, I got my Pettersson card, and so that was very exciting. It was a good price. It was like $70 when that's card sometimes going for over 100 on eBay. So I know Mathieu feels like he should get a cut. So Mathieu, I'll say, like when I get this graded, then sell it one day, 10% is going to you. Okay, just you got to remind
Wow,
me.
generous. Yeah,
uh,
I feel like those stories where you kind of work for it, you feel like you really like earned that deal
yeah.
you get on the card, and then there's like a special connection or something.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I put a lot of work into this. So Matthew, 5%. Come on. Let's be real. Also, I've got another adventure coming because I found someone selling a McDavid KSA 8.5
Mm.
Young Guns, but this person's in Niagara. And I was like, he said like 800 at first, and no one responded. Then he said 600, and I wrote being like, would you ship it? And then he was like, how about 500? Or no, I don't know, whatever. I did some negotiating, like kind of saying just like, I'm not interested. Like 600 is, because I saw that one sold it actually, KSA is like some crappy grading company. And I saw also a McDavid Young Guns KSA 8.5 sell on eBay for like 572. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to spend 600 if I could have
Yeah.
gotten it on eBay for cheaper. But then, so I wrote to him saying like, no, thanks. And then he wrote back like, how about 500? But you have to come pick it up. So now I've got this whole thing planned for next weekend where I'm going to be borrowing my brother's car, and then my wife and I are going to spend a day in Niagara. I'm going to look up like things to do there to make it a fun day, and then part of it will be picking up this McDavid. And then I'm probably going to be asking you what to do with it. Like I could like list it right away and make like a profit right off the bat,
Yeah.
or I could like send it to get graded first and then sell it right away. Or I could just send it to get graded and then hold on, and like, or I could just, do nothing. So maybe we'll have to look at the card and try to guess like what we think the PSA grading would be. Like if it was going to be an
Yeah.
8, then I'd rather just sell it as a KSA. But if we think it's going to be a 9+, then all of a sudden, maybe it's worth it.
Yeah, it's interesting. These, like, let's call them secondary grading companies. So basically not PSA or Beckett. People just don't trust them as much. And that's because people have noticed that the actual card inside kind of varies, even if you look at all these 10s. So I still think that's a pretty sweet deal, though, because $500 for a raw McDavid is pretty decent deal. So and it's one that like is at least in pretty good condition, if not very good condition. So yeah, that'll be interesting to kind of look at what you could do with that. It obviously has less value staying in that KSA case just because people don't trust it as much. But you'll have to kind of decide, do you want to take a few quick dollars, or take what is definitely a risk in taking the card out and then resubmitting it. I think you'd have to spend $50 to get that graded.
Oh wow, yeah. So yeah, we'll have to take a close look, and then we're gonna learn about grading on a future show. So those are my stories. Anything else you want to say before we end the podcast and get to the exciting after show with the PAX opening?
No, I think that's pretty much the highlights. I think we can probably get to the excitement of the after show of opening up our 2015-16 Series
exciting.
1-10.
And if people want to see...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is the first 10 I've got. I've got 4 of these. So if you are not in on this 10 and you want to be, I can start doing these every week or whenever you want. And basically, you get a chance to have a McDavid.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're listening to the podcast and you're thinking like, how can I watch this, how this went, if you go to nearminthockey.com/YouTube, that'll take you to the YouTube video of this episode. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you, by the way. So we're signing off here. If you want us to talk more about some free agency stuff, we could always, to be continued next week. Send us some questions if you have any topics you want us to cover. At nearminthockey on Twitter. We're on Instagram at nearminthockey. We've been tweeting out, or we've been posting some fun pictures, I should say, of some of the cards we've been buying and selling. And yeah, thanks so much for listening. Oh, a 5-star review on iTunes also wouldn't hurt. Like anything you want to do to help the show, or give us any feedback of what you'd like us to do to keep you engaged, we are here and ready to grow with our community of listeners. So thanks again so much for listening. We'll catch you next week, and goodbye.